I want all of my followers all over the world to understand exactly what we're facing here in the US. Donald Trump has announced that the media can no longer criticize him, or they will face punishment by potentially losing their license. Again, Trump is threatening to strip networks of their license if anybody in their programming criticizes him. I know so many of you cannot believe this is what we're living through, but here is where we are. This is what a sitting president is commanding. Many of us read Project 2025 cover to cover, and we did our very best to warn people inside our country not to vote for him again. So many people didn't listen. And now it is too late, because we are living in an unprecedented time. And each day is more harmful and damaging than the one before.
There is a very important distinction between what the president has done to Jimmy Kimmel and what he is threatening to do to networks all over the country. First, he didn't actually violate Jimmy Kimmel's First Amendment right. He just threatened the network. And because the network is in the middle of this big merger deal, they made a deal with the president. They said, we will get rid of Kimmel if you go ahead and approve this merger. There are all sorts of regulations and parameters that they need the FCC to change in order for their big deal to go through. Now, just on Air Force One, a little while ago today, he has threatened to take away the licenses of any network that has a show that criticizes him. That is a violation of the First Amendment right, because the government should not do anything to infringe on our free speech. But that's exactly what he's going to do. So these things with Colbert and Kimmel, they were test balloons. And people are quiet on the right. The Republicans are sitting on their hands. They're not saying a word. And if we don't continue to be very, very loud about this, he's going to change the country as we know it. He does not want anyone criticizing him. He says 97% of the shows are criticizing him. If he's doing such a great job, then we wouldn't all be criticizing him now, would we?
Donald Trump's attack on the media continues, but he keeps failing. You might remember he filed a lawsuit against the New York Times to the tune of $15 billion. Took it to court, and the court said, nah, that's not a thing. We're not letting this proceed. So once again, Donald Trump gets a loss in the courts. He's done nothing but lose in the courts as of late. Things are starting to fall apart for Donald Trump, and we almost have to stand back and let it happen, because MAGA is tearing itself apart. We've got the Charlie Kirk situation. We've got the problems for the farmers and the economy and all that sort of thing. He keeps trying to do things to distract attention or make him look tough. And the fact of the matter is, none of it is fucking working. So Donald Trump wants to sue the New York Times for $15 billion. They said no, the courts aren't going to do it. Same thing can be said for the Jimmy Kimmel situation. Well, they thought this was a big deal. Disney and ABC bent the knee. But now the pushback is so big, the boycotts and the noise and the people coming out. Now Disney and ABC have to rethink this. But then they're going to have to piss off Donald Trump. So what the fuck is going to happen? Everything Donald Trump tries does not work. And it's going to catch up with him and the Republican Party soon. Can we trust any of the mainstream media at this point? I'm talking left side, right side, either side. Can we trust them to tell us the truth, to do the right thing, to not be hypocritical? I'm here to tell you, I don't think we can. I really don't think we can. And I'll give you a case in point. Turn on MSNBC right now. They will be talking about Jimmy Kimmel, how this was a violation of the First Amendment, how it was censoring, how horrible it is for this country. And I agree with him. But last week, MSNBC fired Matthew Dowd because he said, well, Charlie wasn't that great a guy, which was true, but that's what Matthew Dowd said. And guess what? MSNBC, who's so appalled right now, fired Matthew Dowd. Fucking hypocrites. Fucking hypocrites. This is why I say the mainstream media is on a downward spiral. Nobody can trust them. Nobody watches them anymore, and it's fading faster and faster every day. So MSNBC, you can be appalled, but you're fucking doing it too.
I'm currently reading up on the Jimmy Kimmel thing, and we all know what's going on with Colbert, and I'm just sitting here. It's not funny. It's one of those uncomfortable laughs. I'm just sitting here thinking about like what's going to happen to all of us small but mighty creators who get out here every day and like say what's going on and analyze things and give people perspective and talk about, you know, the fine print and things that people need to know. Hopefully it's just that they shut down our social media. Not that I want that to happen, but they really seem to be pro making examples out of people at the moment.
Do you ever wonder why we say you're in a cult, MAGA? Do you ever wonder why we're constantly saying you're in a cult? I'm going to give you a prime example. Everybody, most people, have been upset over the political violence that just took place with Charlie Kirk, the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And Charlie Kirk was absolutely silenced for his freedom of speech because what he said was hateful and wrong, and people didn't like it. Now, I didn't like what Charlie Kirk stood for as far as that goes. I did not. I thought the way he reacted to minorities and the LGBT community, trans community, all of that was horrible. However, he did have a right to freedom of speech. And I think we can all agree that political violence and taking away people's right to free speech should absolutely not be infringed upon. In fact, our forefathers agreed with that, and they put it in the Constitution. And everybody on the right's been super upset that Charlie Kirk was silenced over his freedom of speech. So here we are, a week later, and the Trump administration is using Charlie Kirk's assassination as an excuse to go after freedom of speech. The people on the right have been getting people fired from their jobs. People on the right have been cheering, having Jimmy Kimmel pulled off the air over his comments about Charlie Kirk. And today, in the UK, Trump made comments that the media does not have the right to criticize him anymore. That he will have to look at keeping licenses from broadcasters and from news organizations that criticize him. Now, what does that tell you? That is what a fascist dictator does. That is state-run TV. And you guys are championing it. You are championing anything that Donald Trump does. And that's why we say you're in a cult. Last week, you were upset about freedom of speech being infringed upon. You were livid that someone was silenced and that his freedom of speech silenced him. And today, and last night, I see you all getting on board with Donald Trump saying that they're going to take away our right to freedom of speech. Now, should Jimmy Kimmel have said what he said? That's not for me to say or to judge. I do know that he has the right to say it. I do know that companies have the right to fire people over things they say. However, they better tread carefully with that because the Constitution does guarantee freedom of speech. And that's all Jimmy Kimmel was doing. He was exercising his right to free speech. And ABC even said that they were afraid Donald Trump and the White House would come after them if they didn't pull his show. Today is my birthday, and you know, I think we all do a little self-reflection on our birthdays. We look back over the past year. We look back over our life in general. And I'm going to be honest with you. In my lifetime, I never thought we would see the day where our democracy would die. But we are there. It is holding on by the smallest of threads right now. And our Constitution is eroding away. And I am watching people who I know to be smart, well thought out people supporting Donald Trump no matter what he does. even if it is coming after the Constitution, and even if it is coming after his democracy. Now I'm going to ask you guys, and I'm going to give you guys a challenge. I want you to go look the 10 signs to an authoritarian takeover and see where we sit. We are one step away. One step.
Well, well, well. It's Friday, baby, and I just want to remind everybody that this little thing that's going on with Jimmy Kimmel has absolutely nothing to do with one or two comments he made about the Kirk dude or the Tyler dude. Oh, no, baby. That is not what this is about, you see. This is about the island guy and Daddy. You know one of the things that Daddy don't like to talk about? He throws a fit, he shouts, he pouts anytime anybody has anything to say about those files being redacted away. That really upsets Daddy, and it upset Charlie, too. He wanted to see the entirety of the unredacted files, baby. Not a good look that Charlie's not here to protest this taking away of free speech and this covering up of that cabal, baby. My. And don't look really good either when Dudu Netanyahu has to come out and say, hey, I had nothing to do with the unaliving of that dude. They do love to feed their base a good conspiracy theory or two. So while you're looking at Dudu thinking that he had something to do with the Charlie dude, you're not watching Dudu rake our coffers and use our monies in a G side. Oh, no. You're preoccupied with trying to tie him to an incident that had absolutely nothing to do with Dudu. But you know what does have to do with Dudu? Those files, too. So you're not thinking about that anymore. And well, Daddy can claim that anybody who says anything that he thinks is insane, yeah, he can just claim in Charlie's name that you must be canceled. Maybe you're a terrorist. Maybe you're Antifa. Maybe you should be locked up. That's right, baby. It has nothing to do with his love for Charlie. It has nothing to do with Dudu Netanyahu. No. But they'll take that bait, and they'll think they're owning the libs today. They don't know he's taking their First Amendment rights away. So, why you think this is about the things that Jimmy had to say? Oh, no. This is about Daddy getting his way, making those files go away, and throwing you away if you dare mention his best friend's name. Anyway, everybody have a nice day, and it's time to shut this down expeditiously. I mean, y'all ready to have a bonfire? All of our fucking TVs?
I don't think MAGA has thought these attacks on free speech all the way through, because guess what? It's wrong that they are trying to get shows off the air that post opinions that Donald Trump doesn't like. It's wrong. It's vile. It's an attack on the First Amendment. It's probably illegal. But if they get away with it, if MAGA doubles down and says, yeah, this is what we're going to do, we can take down any show we don't like the politics of, guess what happens in 2028 when we get a Democratic trifecta? Bye-bye Fox News. Bye-bye Newsmax. And bye-bye Sinclair stations across the country. My God, what's good for the goose, after all, is good for the gander. Don't forget it.
So this just then, Donald Trump in the Oval Office just now said that he is very big on free speech. He's a big pro-free speech guy. However, the media is not allowed to criticize him. He says that most of the news stories about him are negative, and therefore any criticism of Donald Trump is illegal. But he's a big free speech guy, but criticizing him is illegal. Okay, watch this.
Follow up on Charlie Kirk. There's been a lot of talk about free speech this week. Do you see a difference between cancel culture and consequence culture?
I mean, your question's a little trick question. I'm a very strong person for free speech. At the same time, when you have networks that where I won an election, like in counties, I guess it's 2,600 to 525. That's called a landslide times two. When you have that level of popularity or voter support, as I did in the last election, and yet 97 and 94% different numbers. You see different numbers with different stats. But 97, 94, 95, 96% of the people are against me in the sense of the newscasts are against me. The stories are they said 97% bad. So they gave me 97. They'll take a great story and they'll make it bad. See, I think that's really illegal, personally. When somebody is given 97% of the stories are bad about a person, that's no longer free speech, that's no longer anything, that's just cheating, and they cheat.
ABC and Disney, well, they're facing massive boycotts this afternoon, and it's not just from the general public who are out here canceling Hulu subscriptions, Disney Plus subscriptions, because they're doing that in the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of subscriptions being canceled after Jimmy Kimmel was essentially sidelined by executives after pressure from Donald Trump. But it's not just that. It's people who are within Disney Plus, people who are within ABC. Marvel star Tatiana Maslany, whose She-Hulk streams on Disney Plus, and Lost creator Damon Lindelof, whose hit aired on ABC, now streams on Disney Plus. Well, they're blasting ABC's suspension of Jimmy Kimmel Live over the Kirk comments. Maslany urged fans to cancel Disney Plus, while Lindelof vowed not to work with Disney until Kimmel is reinstated, and they're not the only ones. Gene Smart, Ben Stiller, and Wanda Sykes are all blasting Disney and ABC over this decision. Now, a lot of people are like, well, that's just Hollywood. Who cares what Hollywood has to say? Well, when it's Disney Plus, when it's Hulu, when it's literally the companies that rely on this talent, well, it matters a whole of a hell lot. And meanwhile, it's not just Hollywood actors and producers and screenwriters who are blasting the decision. It's the former CEO of Disney too, Michael Eisner, who came out and defended Jimmy Kimmel today, saying, quote, "Where has all the leadership gone? If not for university presidents, law firm managing partners, and corporate chief executives standing up against bullies, who then will step up for the First Amendment?" The suspending indefinitely of Jimmy Kimmel immediately after the chairman of the FCC's aggressive yet hollowing threatening of the Disney Corporation is yet another example of out-of-control intimidation. Maybe the Constitution should have said, quote, "Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press except in one's political or financial self-interest." By the way, for the record, this ex-CEO finds Jimmy Kimmel very talented and funny. Michael Eisner served as the CEO of Disney for over 20 years and is now blasting the company he once served, the company he once led. And it's not just folks inside Disney, it's not just actors in Hollywood, it's also comedian hosts online, including Jon Stewart, Stephen Colbert, and Jimmy Fallon, all of whom criticized the suspension. And one more person came out today that I think you'd find interesting. Senator Ted Cruz, who came out and blasted Brendan Carr in ways that I didn't think were possible from this Republican senator, who said Carr's warning was essentially that of a mob boss. It was mob talk from the show Goodfellas. Cruz warned that censorship will end up bad for conservatives, breaking with Donald Trump, who praised Brendan Carr. Let that sink in. You have Hollywood, you have producers, you have former CEOs, you have Ted Cruz all coming out and saying this is wrong. And not just that, you have hundreds of thousands, probably millions at this point, of people across the world canceling their Disney Plus subscriptions, canceling their Hulu subscriptions, because they are saying enough is enough. If you canceled your subscription and you want to subscribe elsewhere, make sure to subscribe to support my work. Because right now, while the White House is targeting media companies, I will never cave. I will always fight back. And mind you, I have a word to mainstream media this afternoon. Jimmy Kimmel wasn't suspended because of his comments on Charlie Kirk. Jimmy Kimmel was suspended because the White House put pressure on ABC Corporation and Disney to cancel Jimmy Kimmel. When you write headlines, you don't write headlines by saying Jimmy Kimmel was canceled because of his Kirk remarks. No, because that's not true. Because his Kirk remarks were freedom of speech. His Kirk remarks He was even ready to acknowledge that a MAGA person did not kill Charlie Kirk, even though the true motives of Tyler Robinson, well, to this day, are still unknown. And so when framing stories, it's important who you read and who you watch. And I'm going to frame the story accurately and timely, because that's what you deserve. And today, the House of Representatives voted by a 310 to 58 margin to pass a resolution honoring Charlie Kirk, condemning political violence in the process. All Republicans and 95 Democrats voted in favor. 58 Democrats opposed, 38 voted present, and 22 did not vote. Now, meanwhile, some news out of Mississippi. Remember Trey Reed, the 21-year-old black man found hanging from a tree in Mississippi? Well, his family's demanding more answers. And Colin Kaepernick, the former star quarterback in the NFL for the 49ers, well, he's about to fund an independent autopsy for Trey Reed. He was found dead on campus earlier this week hanging from a tree, but his family, represented by Benjamin Crump, have raised concerns. The Trump administration is weighing raising the Social Security retirement age, folks, to prevent insolvency. Frank Bisignano, the Social Security Commissioner, says that trust funds could run dry by 2034, triggering a 24% cut in benefits, and therefore you may have to wait a little longer for the benefits that you worked on and your hard-earned benefits. Meanwhile, a Getty photographer captured Kash Patel, the FBI director's handwritten notes during his congressional testimony, including the phrase, quote, "good fight with Swalwell." Swalwell referring to Eric Swalwell, the congressman from California. Today, the United States Senate rejected both parties' short-term funding bill, meaning we're going to have a government shutdown if things don't change. The Republican House bill failed 44 to 48. Democrats failed 47 to 45. They need 60 votes. They're not anywhere close, which means that we're on the verge of a government shutdown in less than 10 days. A federal judge dismissed Donald Trump's $15 billion lawsuit against the New York Times, calling the complaint improper and full of invective, essentially saying that the complaint filed by Donald Trump was garbage. Donald Trump says the United States is trying to put troops back in Afghanistan, trying to get back Afghanistan's Bagram airfield from the Taliban, calling its loss a total disaster of Biden's withdrawal, though Afghan and Chinese officials rejected the idea. But here's the situation. Donald Trump was the reason we had to pull out in the first place because of the deal he made with the Taliban at Camp David. A CDC advisory panel voted to limit this fall's COVID vaccine to people 65 or older or with underlying health conditions, narrowing earlier guidance and potentially creating access hurdles for others. The advisory panel tabled a vote on delaying hepatitis B shots for newborns, leaving current recommendations unchanged. NATO jets intercepted 3 Russian MiG-31s that violated Estonian airspace today near the Gulf of Finland in a 12-minute incursion. Essentially, Estonia has now invoked consultations under Article 4. Poland had already done it. Estonia is now next. In addition, federal agents used tear gas and pepper balls to disperse around 100 demonstrators outside an ICE facility in Broadview, Illinois. And a 42-year-old man was arrested by ICE and died in a Nassau County, New York jail, marking the first ICE detainee death there since the county began housing federal detainees under a new partnership entered into with ICE back in February. That's all the news right now. Make sure to subscribe to support my work, and I'll see you bright and early in the morning for another update.
All right, y'all want to know more about the Federal Reserve? At least a couple of you said that. So here we go. I think that everything you need to know about the Federal Reserve right now, you can kind of see in what's called the dot plot. Now, they voted on Wednesday, 2 days ago, to lower interest rates by 1/4 point, which was broadly expected. But when they announced that they are lowering interest rates by 1/4 point, they put out a press release kind of with some pretty vague language about their thinking. They say how each member of the board voted. And then they release, not every meeting, but most meetings, economic projections and release what's called the dot plot. The dot plot is a projection, is a mapping, of how every member of the Board of Governors thinks interest rates will change over the rest of the year and over the rest of next year. So I think it's easiest if I just show you. So here's actual interest rates, and apologies that I'm so awful at this platform. I don't know how to make this better or me smaller, so I'm just going to move over here. But this graph picks up mid 2022, and you can see that this is the response to the really bad inflation summer where interest rates are rising, through mid 2023, right? Through the fall of 2023, you can see the Fed raising interest rates. It stops for a while, and then at the end of 2024 starts to lower them, but because they're starting to see weakness in the labor market. But around this point, Trump becomes president, announces a pro-inflation policy, i.e. tariffs, and they hold on interest rates until this last meeting in which they voted to lower them again. So this is the actual path of interest rates in the economy. Now, right at the end, we get what's called the dot plot. Each dot represents where a board of governors thinks interest rates will go by the end of the year. So it's the 2025 year end. So here's where we are. 4.08 is the average interest rate right now. And here's where the governors think they'll be for over the next few meetings. And then here's the projection for 2026. So what do we see here? We see a Fed that is divided over what is a very difficult economic question, is what is going to be the ultimate and worst economic impact of tariffs. Will it raise prices so that we have kind of spiraling inflation, or will it hurt the labor market to the point that we'll enter a recession? You can see the two camps. These people, right? This person thinks that we're going to have to raise interest rates by the end of the year. That means they think inflation is going to take off to the point where we're going to have to curb price growth. These people are more like wait and see, of like, we can't lower interest rates any further because there are so many inflation questions, but we need to not cut off the labor market, and like shove it into a recession. So these group right here, this is the inflation camp. They are more worried about inflation, which is why they have very conservative estimates of where interest rates are going to go. Jerome Powell said in his press conference that tariffs will increase prices. The question is whether it'll be a one-time bump or whether or not it'll be like a permanent upward pressure for inflation that would require the one-time bump might just be some pain in the economy. A permanent upward pressure would require interest rate policy. They have no idea which it'll be because we haven't pursued tariffs like this in decades. And there's really no economic justification for it. And it relies so much on how much people retaliate against us, and the policy itself is changing. So this is like, we don't know what's going to happen with inflation, but we're worried inflation is going to go up and might not be a one-time bump. This camp right here, right, this line, these are all people worried about the labor market, and they want interest rates to go from where it is now to fall at least one or two more times by the end of the year because they're seeing weakness in the labor market. So they think interest rates need to be lowered to help businesses and help consumers go out and spend and hopefully do something with labor demand. This is a really hard question because even though we're seeing some hits to labor demand, like we're not seeing hiring pick up, it's been low for a while, we're also rapidly shifting labor supply because we're actively deporting workers from the economy. So the Trump policy of tariffs is one thing. The Trump policy of deportation is another, and it actively reduces labor supply. So how bad the labor market is a question that's hard to answer as it's actively shifting beneath our feet. And you can see the Board of Governors, they don't have consensus on which is the worst problem, and that they're kind of holding around, don't do anything too drastic. And then we got this guy right here. Who is this? Well, open speculation said this is the new Trump appointee. And then later he himself said, yeah, this was me. Someone thinks that inflation, not a problem. Labor market acting, calmly, ain't going to do it. We need to drop by at least 1.5 points to juice the economy, which is the exact thing that Trump has been saying for months he would like to see happen. So the person who thinks this is the person who was just appointed to the Board of Governors by President Trump, who still works for him. People are kind of calling him a lackey, an empty suit. Just like Trump's representative on the Board of Governors. And the reason why they say that is because he still works for the White House. He works for the Council of Economic Advisors. Trump is his boss. Trump is someone he talks to every day. And so the idea that a Board of Governors would be unduly influenced by the president to the point where people would call him an empty suit is because he still works there. And look what he did. He put his interest rate estimate as where you have to go down 1.5 points over the next 3 months. Yeah, 3 months. So this is the politics and what's at stake for the Board of Governors, is that you have here people, independent, looking at the economic data, responding. They're not in consensus. They don't know what's going to happen, but they're all hedged around what is the most likely economic outcome. And then you have someone who makes decisions based on what Trump tells him to do. And that's where he is. And he doesn't sit with everybody else. I think this illustrates what is the potential effect of political interference at the Fed, is that you would take some of these dots of people thinking seriously about the problem and what the economy needs right now, and you replace them with more of these dots of doing what Trump wants when Trump says it, because that's what the Fed needs to do. Trump wants more of those dots. He's actively trying to fire Lisa Cook, who is a member of the Board of Governors. And this was announced after the last Fed meeting when they held rates steady. But I had talked about this, and you might have seen something about this. The head of the FHA, who is a Trump appointee, produced data and documents from his agency to say that before she was a Fed governor, when she was still a private citizen, she applied for 2 mortgages as a primary residence to get a preferred tax and interest rate on those properties. Now, and Trump has then tried to fire her. Now, I don't know if you've been following since then, but what reporting has uncovered is that this guy at the FHA who went through documents of people who the president doesn't like to find mortgage, irregularities. Yeah, his parents definitely did the same thing, or allegedly did the same thing. So did at least 3 members of Trump's cabinet. The thing about political appointees is that a lot of them have multiple residences, and so this is like a really high hit rate for a really rare problem amongst a particular set of people. Also, she produced documents saying that she did not apply for the second mortgage and said it was going to be a secondary home and not a primary home. A federal court intervened on her behalf to say she needs to sit at the Board of Governors meeting, and Trump immediately went over their head, begging the Supreme Court to let him fire her for cause for something that she allegedly but probably didn't do before she was even appointed to the Board of Governors. He is attacking this woman with everything that he has because he would like to replace her, and i.e. get another dot where he wants it on the dot plot. That is the political read of the Federal Reserve's meeting on Wednesday. There's more to it than that, but I think the dot plot kind of illustrate what's at stake.